Hello world, it's Dave again, and I'm going to greet more specifically Kyle because I made this video for you because you were kind enough to send me an email with some questions, which allows me to be creative on my channel and gives me a purpose for making videos. So I appreciate that, and I'm going to try and go over a few of the questions you had about teaching in Japan. It was not too many questions, so I should be able to get through this without making any kind of a monstrous huge video. I'm just going to jump back and forth to the questions that you had concerning, working in Japan for teaching specifically, and try and do my best to answer the questions that you had. Okay, so teaching English as a second language has been an interest of yours for a while. You were wondering what was the length of this kind of job, and is it just a 1 to 4 year placement, and then you have to return to your country? We'll start there. So, what is the length of the job? The length for your contract, because what you do in my experience, which is what I'm going to talk about because it's what I know best, is it's done in a contract and it's done for a period of time, usually around a year, although I believe you could negotiate for slightly smaller or longer periods of time. But usually around a year is how long your contract length is for. But with that being said, you can renew a number of times over. You could, I've actually just, I'm coming into probably within 2 months of my contract ending for the first time that I've come here, and I really enjoyed the experience. It was everything I hoped for and more, and so I'm going to re-sign with them. And you could perpetually keep doing this. You could continue to re-sign with them because really it's in their best interest when you get into one of these companies and you start to, you're doing well, you're getting the results that they'd like to see at the schools. It's in their interest to keep you because you're already trained. The schools are familiar with you, you're familiar with the schools, you already know the run of things. And so to renew your contract is beneficial on both sides. It's good for you, you get to continue with the job that you potentially enjoy, and good for them, excuse me, because they don't have to spend the time retraining someone and relocating someone to the position. So it's just a question of efficiency, and it works really, really well for them that you would continue. And so I think it's, what's the word, perpetuity. You could continue in perpetuity if you wanted to. I know a guy when I first got here he was a fantastic person who was subbing at the school that I was at because they needed to transition whoever was there before out of it. And when I spoke to him, he had been working in Japan with this company now for over 7 years. And he'd started as I had, teaching in the classes and whatnot and doing that kind of thing, an assistant language teacher, an ALT. But then that extended to something else where he now speaks fluent Japanese, and he enjoys traveling so much that he was interested to kind of, move around a little bit more. And so he's moved into a position where he just subs for the company, and he's got a contract. It goes all year round. And whenever they need a spot filled, he kind of temporarily is moved out and put up by the company near that school, and he um, contributes to the transition of somebody else moving into that position. So he gets to see a ton of Japan. He's constantly moving around, and so that's just to make the point that your job can evolve here, because I know that that may not necessarily be for everybody, because I know as much as I'd like to travel and see other places in Japan, I've made that a goal, not just to become an absolute native where you don't actually really know of anywhere aside from where you live specifically. Native syndrome, I like to call it. Um, but it is just another option that you have, so you could move around. But also answering that question as well, that how long could you work here? Well, you could just keep working here, and there are slightly different variations in the job if you wanted to move into some other different role down the line. If you didn't just always want to teach at a school, that's a possibility. There's also the possibility to change which grade it is, excuse me, that you're teaching. If you wanted to say you'd always taught younger kids, they reassess at the end of the year and ask you, would you be happy staying with this school? Would you want to move to different schools potentially? And at that time, you can kind of massage in whatever other interest you might have in terms of the evolution of your job. So the companies that I've interacted with, that I've heard of people interacting with, do make an effort to kind of have a conversation going where they, like I say, evolve what it is that you're doing here. So if you have an interest to change, they can do that. But if you have an interest to remain the same, which is kind of where I am at the beginning of this, I feel like I really want to develop the relationships that I have at these schools that have, just started in the last 12 months for me, and you want to keep going down that path, then it really works for them, and you could keep going. Okay, so let's jump back into your email and see. Is there any way for this to become a full-time job and you work until you retire at an old age? Most of the information I've found makes me believe that you work until your work visa expires. So that's kind of the same point, like I'm saying. You could continue to work at one of these places and they help you renew your work visa. There are details that change in terms of taxation and how you interact maybe with a couple of their public services when I think you've moved beyond 2 years. But you can continually work. Like I say, you got a guy, for example, who's worked here for 7 years and keeps on going. Let's see, continuing along. Does teaching at a normal school, private school, or a Japanese word, you've defeated me here. Kaiwa. AI Kaiwa. Oh well. Let's see, private school, normal school, or a word that I'm having difficulty pronouncing that I should have practiced beforehand. Have a difference for how long you are employed. Off the top of my head, again, I can only rely on my own experience to answer this question. I would say that it does vary because I know a few people in the private schools and they just naturally work different hours than I do working in a public school. So it would stand to reason then that other details of their schedule might vary as well, whether you're in one of these schools that I can't pronounce, a private or public. Let's see how long you are employed, because I would feel discouraged if I knew I was working at multiple schools every week and then after 1 to 4 years I'm forced to go home. I would prefer a more long-lasting job where I only work at one school every day, just like a teacher would here in Canada. And would it be better if I was fluent in Japanese? Okay, so 2 things there that I can answer from. Something that people should be aware of. If you work for a private school, I believe it's more specific as to where your location is going to be set up and a little more predictable in terms of the classes that you have. But when you get assignments from public schools, it's very often the case that you're going to get multiple schools that you're going to be at. And that was not something that I was aware of when I first started to do this. I thought, oh, I just get assigned to a school, kind of under the impression with the interest that you had, where I figured that would be best to get to know people, to develop relationships and all the rest of it. But the reality was when I got here that a lot of people work at multiple schools. One of the guys I know works at upwards of 4 to 5 schools a week, so he's spending one day a week at each of these schools. Now, that's not always the case. It should just be something that you're aware of, because I only got assigned to 2 schools, and I think that's fantastic. So I got a little bit of variety. I got a bit of this, being able to see another place if I wanted to, but I do spend a significant amount of time at each, that it's not a question of having a real meaningful interaction with the people because my time is split so far between all these different places. So you can end up working for a couple of different ones, but you could end up working for 2, as low as I have been, which I think is ideal. And again, this is another chance for a dialogue for you to have with the company that were to hire you. You'd say, I really have a preference, because these application processes take place over such a long period of time. You can make that kind of explicit at the beginning and say, I'd be really interested in an assignment that lends itself towards me having less schools. And then maybe if they cannot make that work for you to begin with, maybe it's something that, again, you could massage into your experience after you've been here for a year, because you sounded like a person who was interested to go for kind of the long run. And so as you develop seniority, you obviously get a little bit more choice of the litter, we'll call it. So you would then be able to make clearer what exactly it is that you want to work with when you're here. But you do stand a chance when you first start to get something closer to what you're interested in, although it's not always the case to begin with. I just got really lucky, and it just so happens that that is particularly my preference, is similar to yours. Is it better, and would it be better if I was fluent in Japanese? It really is. It's funny to answer that in a better or worse scenario, because I've enjoyed the process of learning Japanese here, because I came into this situation with absolutely no Japanese, but with the intention to learn. I had no background, but I knew that when I was here getting, involved with the language, taking lessons for it was an aspect I really wanted to enjoy. And I would say a huge part of my experience in coming to Japan, and one of the big things I enjoyed about it, was the culture shock. That was a major reason for me to come over here, was to be completely out of my element, really, stimulate that brain to be in an environment entirely unfamiliar. And a large part of that is learning the language when I got here. Now, did that make things any easier for me? No, it made them far, far harder. So, in a blatant black and white answer to your question, is it better in a practical sense to be able to speak fluent Japanese? Yes, everything is made easier by that. But it's not something that you can't overcome and can be really a part of your culture shock when you're here. So I would just say it this way: if you can, you know, pull it off and learn some fluent Japanese before you get here, fantastic. But if you don't, it'll just turn into a part of your experience as you learn. The one thing I caution against is not learning Japanese. I just think that you'll have, again, we can kind of decide how we experience things. I really do have that view. And in the end, if you decide I'm just not going to learn Japanese and still have a good time, you could do it. But I would say that you will have an incredible experience to learn Japanese, however you go about it. If you're fluent before you get here, great. If you start learning when you get here, wonderful as well. But really, make an attempt to learn the language. People will appreciate you for it, and you're a better person for it. I've been reading all sorts of cool brain books just about the benefits of learning other languages in terms of how that really, really strengthens your mind, as uniquely strengthens your mind compared to any type of other learning that we do. So ideally, sure, speak the language fluently, but still just as good, learn the language and have it be a part of your culture shock that it's something completely new and you approach when you get here. More than, I guess the final answer is that language is just something that you get to enjoy as a part of your experience here and doesn't become a prerequisite of what you need for you to get into it in the first place. Okay. If I want, oh, okay, and that the end of that question was, will it affect a long-lasting job at a school? No. It'll help maybe once you get really good at it and people will be like, man, I love talking to this guy in Japanese in between classes because it's so easy to communicate with this foreigner. Sure, but tons of people have founded their relationships at these schools just through good hard work, doing their job well, and not necessarily knowing the language or being at a level where I'm at, where, I call it like cute in quotation marks Japanese. When the foreigner speaks Japanese, they're like, oh, that's so cute. It drives me nuts because I'm at a cute level of Japanese where I'm not so much taken seriously as coddled for it. But you get there, and like I say, the language can just be a part of the whole experience here, not necessarily a prerequisite to you succeeding or furthering your experience. Okay, also, what happens after your work visa expires? Simple 2-second answer to that. You just renew it with the company. They'll sponsor you again if you want to go through the company again. At what point can you apply for permanent resident visa? Excellent question, and this is something that I don't necessarily know the answer to, but I mean, I almost don't want to, I want people to come to me with questions. I want to be the oracle, but I can't be. And I can say this, though, that the answer to your question is not far out of your reach. You can look that up pretty simply. I wish I could give it to you personally. I could probably find it tonight if I looked it up, but I don't have it on hand. So look it up. You'll find the answer to that. It's no big deal. What would be permanent resident? That's so you could live here if the teaching thing doesn't work out. Not a bad idea. You start with the teaching, you get into it for a while, you learn the language, and then you independently apply for a work visa when you have fluent Japanese, and then it's so much easier to get into the workforce for modeling or movies or whatever high fantasy you may have, whatever that may be. Okay, so yeah, and you're not going to be doing this for a little while. You got a few. You've already got the prerequisites. You're getting your BA in linguistics. So that's no problem whatsoever. Yeah, I don't think things are going to change that much by the time that you actually come to apply for this. So when you come out of school, I think it'll still be right for the experience. I think you'll have an incredible time, and I really do hope that what I've offered now gives you a little more insight into your experience that you might eventually have when you come over here. So, like I said, I appreciate your email. It gives me the kind of source material I need to be creative and allows me some interaction, which is something that I always wanted to do with this channel. And if you enjoyed this video, please do like, subscribe, and share. And if you have any other questions, of course, just toss me another email, Kyle, and I'll do my best to answer them. If you just got a few shorthand questions, I won't, again, toss it into another whole video or whatever. I can just correspond with you. And that's about it. So, like I like to say, thanks for tripping with Dave. And until we meet again next time, world, ciao for now. Peace. Thanks for checking out my channel.